The transaction happened in a trading post that smelled like wet fur and tobacco spit. Rowan Vance stood near the back wall, away from the stove, watching men haggle over pelts and powder. He'd ridden 2 days through snow that could bury a horse, hadn't slept except in 40-minute stretches against a tree, and his hands still shook, not from cold, but from what he was about to do. Buy a woman. Not rent. Not marry proper. Buy. The word tasted like iron in his mouth, but the baby was dying, and he was out of options. You Vance? The voice came from a man with a beard that hadn't seen scissors in a year, eyes like dirty ice. Luther Gaines, the kind of man who'd sell his own shadow if the price was right. I am. Got what you asked for. Gaines jerked his head toward a corner where a woman sat on a bench, hands folded, staring at nothing. Widow, clean, young enough. Lost her own baby 2 months back, milk dried up, but she knows her way around an infant. Rowan looked at her and felt something twist in his chest. She wasn't what he expected. Thin, yeah, but not broken-looking. Dark hair pulled back severe, face pale as birch bark, eyes that didn't quite focus on anything in the room. She wore black, widow's weeds, and her hands were raw-knuckled, working hands. She looked like she'd already died and just hadn't bothered lying down yet. She got a name? Eliza Hart. Husband died in a mine collapse September last. Baby followed a week later. She's got no people except an uncle, and he's the one selling. Gaines spat into a tin cup. $100. That's the price. Rowan had brought 120, everything he had left after a brutal trapping season. The number made his stomach turn. She know about this? Gaines shrugged. She knows she's going somewhere. Whether she cares is another question. Rowan walked over to her. She didn't look up. Ma'am. His voice came out rougher than he meant. Name's Rowan Vance. I got a situation. A baby, 8 months old, won't eat, won't take nothing I give him. He's dying. I need someone who knows about babies, and your uncle says you do. She still didn't look at him. Her voice, when it came, was flat as winter sky. My baby's dead. I know. I'm sorry. Then you know I'm not who you want. Maybe not, but you're who I can afford. That got her eyes up. They were brown, darker than he expected, and there was something in them that wasn't quite dead yet, a flicker of anger maybe, or just the reflex of a cornered animal. Your uncle's asking $100, Rowan continued. I pay that. You come to my cabin, you help with the boy. That's the deal. And if I say no, then I find someone else, and you go wherever your uncle puts you next. I'm guessing it won't be church choir. Her jaw tightened. She looked away, out the frost-cracked window where snow was starting again, and Rowan could see her doing the math, the kind of math women in her position had to do, weighing bad against worse. How far is your cabin? 2 days north, up in the timber country, nearest neighbor's a day's ride. What happened to the baby's mother? Died birthing him. Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then, what's the baby's name? Cale. She tested it silently, lips moving. Then she stood, and Rowan realized she was taller than he'd thought, almost eye level with him. She held out her hand. I'll go. But we're clear on something first. I'm not your wife. I'm not your woman. I'm there for the baby. That's all. Rowan shook her hand. Her grip was stronger than it had any right to be. Fair enough? He paid Gaines in gold coin, watched the man count it twice, and then Eliza Hart became his. The word property hung in the air between them, unspoken but heavy as a stone. They left within the hour. The ride north was silent except for the creak of saddle leather and the crunch of snow under hooves. Rowan had brought an extra horse, a steady mare that didn't spook easy, and Eliza rode like she'd been doing it her whole life, back straight, hands light on the reins, eyes on the trail ahead. She didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk, didn't complain when the temperature dropped and the wind started cutting through their coats like knives. Rowan appreciated that. He wasn't much for talking either, especially not now, with his mind half on the trail and half on what he'd left behind. Cale, with old Margaret Tully watching over him. Margaret, who meant well but didn't know a damn thing about why the boy wouldn't eat, why he screamed himself raw and then went silent, limp, like he'd given up. 3 weeks. That's how long Cale had been refusing food. 3 weeks of Rowan trying everything, goat's milk, sugar water, mashed potato, broth so thin it was practically air. The boy would turn his head, clamp his mouth shut, and sometimes he'd scream, but mostly he just faded. The doctor in town, 2 days' ride south, a drunk who smelled like medicinal alcohol and poor choices, had said it was a wasting sickness, something that happened sometimes with babies, especially ones born hard like Kyle had been. Nothing to be done, the doctor had said. Make him comfortable. Pray. Rowan didn't pray. He'd stopped that when Sarah died, blood-soaked and screaming, the baby finally coming after 16 hours, but Sarah not surviving it. He'd stopped believing in any god that would trade one life for another like that. But he wasn't ready to let Cale go either, so he'd asked around, quiet-like, and someone mentioned Luther Gaines, and Gaines had mentioned a widow with milk knowledge, and here they were. They made camp the first night in a clearing Rowan knew, sheltered by pine and rock. He built a fire, set coffee to boil, laid out jerky and hardtack. Eliza took her share without comment and ate mechanically like it was a chore she had to finish. "You always this quiet?" Rowan asked finally, because the silence was starting to press on him. She looked at him over the fire. "You want me to talk?" "Didn't say that." "Then what do you want?" Good question. He didn't have an answer, so he drank his coffee and kept his mouth shut. Eliza finished eating, then stood and walked to the edge of the firelight, staring out into the dark. Rowan watched her, trying to figure what was happening in her head. She stood like someone waiting for something, punishment maybe, or permission. He didn't know which. "You can sleep near the fire," he said. "I'll take first watch." She didn't acknowledge him, but after a minute she came back, spread her bedroll, and lay down with her back to the flames. Within 10 minutes her breathing evened out, and Rowan wondered if she was actually asleep or just pretending. He stayed up, feeding the fire, listening to the woods. Somewhere distant a wolf howled, and his horse shifted nervously. He checked the rifle, made sure it was loaded, and tried not to think about what he'd do if Cale was already gone when they got back. They reached the cabin mid-afternoon the second day. It sat in a clearing Rowan had carved out himself, log-built, chinked tight against the cold, smoke coming from the chimney. Margaret's doing. She'd kept the fire going, kept things warm. Rowan dismounted, helped Eliza down, though she didn't need it, and pushed open the door. The smell hit him first. Sour milk, soiled cloth, something else underneath, sweet and wrong, the smell of sickness. Margaret Tully was in the rocking chair, Cale wrapped in a blanket on her lap. She looked up when they entered, relief washing over her weathered face. "Thank the saints, Rowan. I didn't know how much longer—" She stopped, seeing Eliza. "Who's this?" "Eliza Hart. She's here to help with Cale." Rowan moved to Margaret, looked down at the baby. Cale was worse. Even in 2 days, he was worse. His face was thinner, skin almost translucent, eyes sunken. He wasn't crying, wasn't moving, just existing, barely. "He hasn't taken nothing," Margaret said, voice shaking. "I tried, Rowan. I tried everything you said, but he won't—" "I know. It's all right." Rowan took the baby, felt how light he was, how fragile. Fear spiked through him, sharp and cold. "You can go home, Margaret. I appreciate what you done." Margaret stood, gathering her things, and Rowan paid her, not much, but what he could spare. She left with a worried, backward glance, and then it was just the three of them. Eliza hadn't moved from the doorway. She was staring at Cale, and her face had gone even paler than before. "Ma'am?" Rowan said. She didn't answer. She was breathing fast, shallow, hands clenched at her sides. "Eliza." She blinked, looked at him. "I can't." "Can't what?" "I can't do this. I can't." She turned toward the door. Rowan moved fast, blocking her way, still holding Cale. "You made a deal." "I didn't know he'd look like—" She stopped, shook her head. "Let me go." "No. I'll give you the money back." "I don't have it yet, but I'll work for it. I'll—" "There's no money to give back. I paid your uncle. Not you." Rowan's voice was hard now, edged with desperation he couldn't hide. "You don't want to be here, fine. I get it. But this boy's dying and you're the only chance he's got. So whatever you're feeling, you push it down and you help him. After that, you can leave. I won't stop you." Eliza's eyes were wet now, shining in the firelight. "He looks like my son." "I know." You don't know. You can't. Maybe not. But I know what it's like to watch someone die and not be able to stop it. So does this make you want to run? Fine. Run after. Right now I need you here. She was shaking, full body tremors like she was coming apart, but she didn't move toward the door again. What do you need me to do? Her voice was barely a whisper. Rowan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Tell me why he won't eat. Eliza made him lay Kyle on the table, unwrap the blanket. She stood over the baby, not touching him, just looking. Her hands hovered, pulled back, hovered again. When did this start? She asked. 3 weeks ago. He was fine before that, fussy, yeah, but he ate. Then one day he just stopped. And the mother died in childbirth? Yeah. Who fed him before? Me. Goat's milk, mostly. Sometimes I'd get cow's milk from a farm downriver, but that's a 2-day trip. Did you try a wet nurse? Couldn't find one. Not up here. Eliza was quiet, studying Cale. Then, carefully, she touched his cheek. The baby didn't react. He's too weak to suck, she said. Look at his mouth. See how his lips are dry? He's starving, but he's too far gone to do the work. So what do we do? She closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had shifted. Not hope exactly, but something harder. Determination. We force him. What? Not force like you're thinking. But we can't wait for him to eat on his own. We have to get food into him another way. She looked around the cabin. You have a clean cloth? Something soft? Rowan found one. Eliza took it, went to the pot of goat's milk warming by the fire, dipped the cloth in, and wrung it out so it was damp but not dripping. Then she came back to Cale, tilted his head gently, and pressed the cloth against his lips. Nothing happened. She tried again, squeezing slightly so a few drops fell into his mouth. Cale's throat moved. A reflex swallow. Eliza's face didn't change, but Rowan saw her hands steady. She did it again, and again. Patient, methodical, each time waiting for the swallow before continuing. It took an hour of Eliza standing over the table, cloth to milk to lips, while Rowan watched and felt something in his chest loosen degree by degree. Finally, Eliza stepped back. That's all he can take right now. Too much and he'll sick it up. Will it be enough? I don't know, but it's more than he had. She looked at Rowan, and for the first time he saw something in her face other than grief. Exhaustion, maybe, or just the bare edge of caring. I need to do this every 2 hours, day and night. Can you keep the milk warm? Yeah. Then that's what we'll do. She turned away, found a chair, and sat down heavily. Her hands were shaking again, but she folded them in her lap and stared at the wall. Rowan wrapped Cale back up, held him, felt the tiny heartbeat against his chest. It was there, faint, but there. Thank you, he said. Eliza didn't answer. The first night was brutal. Every 2 hours Eliza woke, or maybe she never slept, Rowan couldn't tell, and repeated the process. Cloth, to milk, to lips. Cale took it, swallowed, sometimes made a small sound that might have been protest or might have been nothing. Rowan kept the fire going, kept the milk warm, stayed out of her way. He'd given her the small room off the main cabin, his own room, while he took the loft. But she barely used it. Mostly, she sat in this chair, or stood by the table, or paced in small circles when the waiting got too heavy. Around 3 a.m, Rowan came down from the loft and found her standing over Cale, just watching him breathe. You should rest, he said quietly. So should you. I'm used to it. You're not. She glanced at him. You don't know what I'm used to. Fair point. He poured himself coffee from the pot that had been sitting too long, tasted like charcoal, drank it anyway. Why'd you agree to come? He asked. Really? Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then, because staying where I was would have killed me. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. My uncle, Luther, he had plans for me. Plans I wasn't going to survive intact. She touched Cale's hand so gently it barely counted as contact. This seemed like the slower death. Guess I was wrong. About what? About it being slow. Rowan didn't know what to say to that, so he drank his terrible coffee and watched her work. By the third day, Cale started crying again. It was a thin sound, weak and scratchy, but it was there. Rowan was outside splitting wood when he heard it, and he dropped the axe and ran inside like the cabin was on fire. Eliza had Cale on her lap, the cloth in her hand, and the baby was crying, actually crying, mouth open, face red, limbs moving. He's hungry, Eliza said, and there was something in her voice Rowan hadn't heard before. Not quite a smile, but close. Really hungry, angry about it. Rowan laughed. He couldn't help it. It burst out of him, relief and exhaustion and something like joy all tangled together. That's good, right? That's good? It's good. She fed Cale the cloth milk, and this time the baby didn't just swallow passively. He tried to suck, weak, but definitely trying. When the cloth came away, he cried harder, wanting more. Can we give him more? Rowan asked. A little, not too much. But Eliza was already preparing another cloth, and Rowan saw that her hands weren't shaking anymore. The days blurred together after that. Feed, rest, feed again. Cale got stronger, degree by degree. By the end of the first week, he could take milk from a spoon. By the end of the second, he'd latch onto a bottle Rowan carved from a gourd and softened leather. Eliza never left the cabin. Rowan tried to get her to walk outside, get some air, but she refused. She stayed close to Cale, always within earshot, like if she turned her back, he'd disappear. Rowan understood that. He felt it too. They developed a rhythm. Rowan handled the outside, hunting, trapping, chopping wood, hauling water. Eliza handled the inside, cooking, cleaning, and most importantly, Cale. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. The work said everything. But there were moments, like the night Rowan came in from checking the trap line and found Eliza sitting by the fire, Cale asleep in her arms, and she was humming. Not a song exactly, just a low, tuneless sound, and her face was soft in a way he hadn't seen before. Or the morning he woke early and came down to find her crying silently while she fed Cale, tears running down her face, but her hands steady, the bottle never wavering. He didn't ask. She didn't explain. They were both haunted. That was enough to know. 3 weeks in, Rowan made a mistake. He'd set a rule when Eliza first arrived, one he thought was reasonable. She stayed in the main room and the small bedroom. The loft was his. She was to leave his things alone, give him that space. It was about control, about keeping some part of the cabin that was still his when everything else had been turned upside down. But Eliza was cleaning one morning while Cale napped and she needed rags. Rowan kept them in a trunk in the loft. She called up to ask. He wasn't there, outside checking snares. She climbed the ladder. The loft was small, just enough space for a bed in the trunk. She found the rags quickly, but on her way back down, something caught her eye. A dress, hanging from a peg on the wall. Blue calico, faded but clean, carefully mended. Sarah's dress. Eliza stopped, stared at it, and something in her shifted. When Rowan came back an hour later, she was waiting for him. Cale was in his cradle, content. Eliza stood by the table, arms crossed. You got something to say? Rowan asked, reading her posture. The dress. His jaw tightened. What about it? You kept it. It's my business what I keep. You kept it, but you won't talk about her. You won't say her name. You built a shrine in your loft and then you lock it away like it's going to bite you. I said it's my business. Rowan's voice was hard now. It is. Until it's not. Eliza took a step closer. That baby down there, he's going to ask about his mother someday. He's going to want to know who she was, what she was like. And you can't tell him, can you? Because you've buried her so deep you can't even look at a damn dress without falling apart. Rowan felt heat rise in his chest, anger mixing with something raw. You got no right. I got every right. I'm the one keeping him alive. I'm the one who's here, day after day, while you hide behind your trap lines and your firewood and your rules about what rooms I'm allowed in. Her voice cracked. You want me to save your son? Fine. I'm doing it. But don't you dare pretend you're doing this alone. Don't you dare act like grief is something only you understand. They stood there, 3 feet apart, both breathing hard. Rowan spoke first, voice low. Her name was Sarah. We married when I was 20. Her 17. She wanted babies, lots of them. Took us 5 years to get Kale, and the birthing killed her. She bled, and there was nothing I could do, nothing the midwife could do, and she was so scared at the end. So scared, and I couldn't. He stopped, swallowed hard. I kept the dress because it still smells like her, like lavender and wood smoke. And yeah, I can't look at it most days, but it's mine to keep, mine to grieve. Eliza's face softened. I know, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just stay out of the loft. She nodded, turned back to Kale. But something had broken open between them, and there was no putting it back. Kitant. That night after Kale was fed and asleep, Eliza spoke again. His name was Thomas, my son. She was sitting by the fire, mending one of Rowan's shirts. He was 6 weeks old when he died. Fever. It came on fast, and he was gone before I could even ride for the doctor. Rowan, sitting across from her, said nothing, just listened. I blamed myself, Eliza continued. Thought I'd done something wrong, hadn't kept him warm enough, hadn't fed him right. My husband, Jacob, he said it wasn't my fault, but he looked at me different after, like I'd broken something precious. She paused, thread slipping through fabric. He died 3 weeks later in the mine, and I was alone. You got people, besides Luther? Had a sister. She married a railroad man, moved east. Haven't heard from her in 2 years. Eliza knotted the thread, bit it off. Luther was the only family left, and he made it clear I was a burden. When you came along with your offer, he couldn't sign fast enough. I'm sorry. Don't be. Like I said, it was the slower death. She looked at him then, direct. This, being here, taking care of Kale, it's not easy. Every time I look at him, I see Thomas. Every time he cries, I hear my boy. But it's the first time since he died that I've felt like I'm doing something that matters. So maybe it's killing me. But maybe it's keeping me alive too. Rowan didn't have words for that, so he just nodded and they sat in silence until the fire burned low. The weeks stretched into a month. Kale thrived. He'd gained weight, his eyes were brighter, and he'd started making sounds, coos and gurgles that filled the cabin with something like music. He recognized Eliza now, would reach for her when she came near, and sometimes Rowan would catch her smiling at the baby when she thought no one was watching. It should have been peaceful, but Rowan felt the clock ticking. Eliza had held up her end. The boy was eating, growing, living, which meant their deal was done, which meant she could leave. He didn't want her to leave. The thought came to him one night while he was lying in the loft, listening to her hum to Kale down below. He didn't want her to leave, and he didn't know what to do with that wanting. It felt dangerous, selfish. She'd made it clear from the start she wasn't his wife, wasn't his woman. She was here for Kale, nothing more. But somewhere in the feeding and the crying and the late-night conversations, that line had blurred. Not into romance, neither of them was ready for that, maybe never would be, but into something else. Partnership. Trust. The kind of bond that forms when two people fight the same battle side by side. He didn't know if she felt it too, didn't know if he had the right to ask her to stay. So he didn't. He just kept working, kept the cabin running, and tried not to think about what would happen when she finally decided to go. The storm came in mid-December, 4 weeks after Eliza arrived. It started as snow, then turned to ice, then became something meaner, a blizzard that screamed around the cabin and turned the world outside into white violence. Rowan had seen storms like this before. They could last days, bury everything, kill anyone stupid enough to be caught out in them. He made sure the cabin was sealed tight, the firewood stacked high inside, the animals secured in the lean-to. Then he settled in to wait it out. Eliza seemed unbothered. She kept to her routine, feeding Kale, cooking meals, mending clothes. But Rowan noticed she kept glancing at the door, like she expected something to come through it. You worried about something? He asked on the second day. Just not used to being trapped inside. It'll pass. Always does. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. The storm raged for 3 days. On the 4th day, it broke suddenly. The wind dying, the snow stopping, the sky clearing to a cold, bright blue. Rowan went outside to check the damage. Snow had drifted against the cabin walls, nearly to the roof on the north side. The lean-to had held, barely. Everything was buried, silent, pristine. He was digging out the door when he heard the horse. At first he thought he'd imagined it. Sound carried strange after a storm. But no, there it was again. Hoofbeats, slow and deliberate, coming up the trail. Rowan straightened, squinting into the brightness. A rider emerged from the tree line, bundled heavy against the cold, leading a pack horse. As they got closer, Rowan's stomach dropped. Luther Gaines. The man rode into the clearing, stopped his horse, and looked down at Rowan with those dirty ice eyes. "Vance," he said, voice flat. "We need to talk." Rowan's hand moved to the knife on his belt. Instinct. "About what?" "About the deal we made. Turns out it ain't as settled as I thought." Luther dismounted, slow, making sure Rowan saw he wasn't armed. But there was something in his posture, something coiled and ready. "See, Eliza's got herself a value I didn't fully appreciate when we made our transaction, and I'm thinking maybe $100 wasn't quite enough. We had a deal. We did. But deals can be renegotiated." Luther smiled, showing teeth gone bad. "Especially when one party didn't know all the facts. You get what I'm saying?" Rowan didn't answer. He was calculating distances, angles, whether he could reach the rifle inside the cabin before Luther could do whatever he was planning. The cabin door opened. Eliza stepped out, Cale in her arms. She saw Luther and went pale. "Hello, niece," Luther said. "Miss me? What are you doing here?" "Checking on my investment, making sure you're being treated right." His eyes flicked to Cale, and something shifted in his expression. Calculation, greed, something sharp. "That the baby?" "That's none of your concern," Rowan said. "Oh, I think it is. See, I've been hearing things, hearing about how Eliza here worked a miracle, brought your dying boy back from the edge. That's valuable knowledge, valuable skills." Luther took a step closer. "And I'm thinking, why should you get all that value for a measly $100? Don't seem fair." Eliza's voice was cold. "You got your money. Now leave." "Can't do that. See, I got debts, niece, debts that need paying. And you," he pointed at her, "you're going to help me pay them." "How?" Luther's smile widened. "There's folks down south, rich folks, who'd pay good money for someone who can save sick babies. Real good money. More than 100, I'll tell you that. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me, and we're going to set up a little enterprise. You do your miracle work, I manage the business side, and we both profit." "No," Eliza said. Wasn't a question. Rowan stepped between them. "She's not going anywhere." "That right?" Luther's hand moved to his coat, and Rowan saw the shape of a pistol underneath. "You planning to stop me?" "If I have to." They stood there, tension stretched wire tight. Cale started to fuss, sensing it. Then Eliza spoke, voice shaking but clear. "Luther, you touch that gun and Rowan will kill you. He's faster than you, meaner than you, and he's got more to lose. So you're going to get back on your horse, ride out of here, and never come back, or you're going to die in this clearing. Your choice." Luther looked at her, then at Rowan, then back. Something in his eyes shifted, recognition maybe that she was right, but he didn't move. "You're my blood, Eliza. You owe me." "I don't owe you nothing. You sold me. Transaction's done. I can unsell you. Law says a lot of things. But the law's 2 days south, and you're here, now, alone. Think about that." Luther's jaw worked. He wanted to argue, Rowan could see it, wanted to push this into violence. But he was also a man who understood odds, and the odds weren't in his favor. Finally, he spat into the snow. "This ain't over." "Yeah, it is," Rowan said. "You come back here, I'll bury you in the woods where no one will find you. That's a promise." Luther mounted his horse, jerked the reins harder than necessary. He looked down at Eliza one last time. "You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be my first." He rode off, the pack horse following, disappearing back into the trees. Rowan and Eliza stood in the clearing, watching until the sound of hooves faded completely. Then Eliza sat down in the snow, still holding Cale, and started shaking. Rowan knelt beside her. "You all right?" "No." Her voice was thin, stretched. "He's not going to stop. He'll come back, or he'll send someone else, and then we'll deal with it." "How? You can't fight the whole world, Rowan." "Maybe not, but I can fight him." Rowan took Cale from her, careful, and helped her stand. Come on, let's get inside. We'll figure it out. They went back into the cabin, and Rowan barred the door behind them. The night after Luther left, Rowan didn't sleep. He sat in the chair near the door, rifle across his lap, watching the windows. Every crack of settling wood, every gust of wind made his hand tighten on the stock. Eliza had taken Cale to the small bedroom, but he could hear her moving around in there, restless, probably not sleeping either. Around 2 in the morning, she came out, wrapped in a shawl, Cale asleep against her shoulder. "You should rest," she said quietly. "Can't. He's not coming back tonight. Too cold, too dark. He'd have to camp, and Luther's not the camping type when there's a warm bed somewhere else." Maybe. Maybe not. Rowan didn't look away from the window. But I'm not taking chances. Eliza sat down across from him, adjusted Cale in her arms. The baby made a small sound but didn't wake. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know yet. That's not good enough. Luther's got connections, Rowan. Men who owe him favors, men worse than him. If he decides he wants me back or wants to take Cale, he's not taking Cale." The words came out harder than he meant. "That's not happening. You can't just will it into being safe. We need a plan." Rowan finally looked at her. "What do you suggest?" She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, "We could leave. Pack up, head further north, find somewhere he can't follow. This is my land, my cabin. I built this with my own hands. And you'll lose it all if you're dead. I'm not running." "Then what? You gonna shoot him next time he shows up? Shoot whoever he sends? And then what happens? Law comes asking questions, you end up hanged for murder, and Cale ends up right back where we started." She was right, and he hated it. Rowan set the rifle down, rubbed his face with both hands. "There's got to be another way." "There is. We make it legal." "Make what legal?" Eliza shifted Cale to her other shoulder. "The arrangement. Right now I'm just here. No paperwork, no official standing. Luther sold me like I was a horse, but there's nothing that says you actually own that transaction. Nothing that says I chose to stay. We change that." "How?" "Marriage." The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Rowan stared at her. "You said, I know what I said. I'm not talking about that kind of marriage. I'm talking about a paper marriage, something that makes it legal, makes it so Luther can't claim I'm still his to sell." Her voice was steady, matter of fact. "We go to town, find a preacher or a magistrate, sign the papers. Then I'm your wife on record, and there's nothing Luther can do about it. You want to marry me. I want to not get dragged south to be some kind of traveling miracle show for rich people's sick babies. Marriage does that." Rowan picked up his coffee, which had gone cold hours ago, drank it anyway. The idea sat wrong with him, but he couldn't articulate why. Maybe because it felt like he'd be taking advantage. Maybe because he didn't want to trap her any more than she already was. "You'd be stuck here," he said finally. "With me. With Cale. Is that what you want?" "Want doesn't matter much anymore. I stopped wanting things when Thomas died." She looked down at Cale, touched his hair gently. "But I'm useful here. I got a purpose. That's more than I had before." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I got." They sat in silence. The fire popped, settled. Outside the wind picked up again, rattling the shutters. "All right," Rowan said. "We'll do it. Soon as the weather clears enough to ride to town, we'll make it legal." Eliza nodded once, stood, and went back to the bedroom with Cale. The door closed softly behind her. Rowan stayed in the chair until dawn, rifle in his lap, trying to figure out if he'd just made things better or worse. The weather didn't clear for another week. Snow kept falling, light but constant, and the temperature dropped so low that the water in the basin froze solid overnight. Rowan spent his days keeping the fire going, checking the animals, hunting when he could. Eliza kept to her routines with Cale, who was getting bigger every day, louder, more demanding. The baby had opinions now. He didn't like being put down, didn't like the cold, wanted to be held constantly, preferably by Eliza, and would scream himself red if she tried to set him in the cradle. "He's spoiled," Rowan said one afternoon, watching Eliza try for the third time to lay Cale down so she could cook. "He's a baby. That's what they do." "Sarah used to say—" He stopped. "What'd she say?" Rowan hesitated, then finished. "She used to say babies could smell fear. If you acted nervous, they'd act up. If you were calm, they'd settle. Sarah sounds smart. She was. Eliza finally gave up, tied Kale against her chest with a long strip of cloth so her hands were free, and went back to cooking. The baby settled immediately, content to be close. Rowan watched them, this woman and this child, moving around his kitchen like they belonged there, and something in his chest pulled tight. It wasn't love. He wasn't ready for that word. But it was something adjacent, something that felt like the beginning of permanence. You thought about what happens after? Eliza asked, not looking at him. After what? After we get married. Luther's not going to just give up. You know that. I know. So what's the plan? We just wait for him to make another move? No, we make ours first. Rowan had been thinking about this, turning it over in his head during the long nights. There's a territorial judge rides circuit through the northern towns. Comes through Pinewood Creek every few months, handles disputes, makes things official. If we can get to him, explain the situation, maybe he can put something legal in place. Protection order, something that says Luther can't touch you or Kale. You think a judge is going to care about one widow and a baby? He might if I pay him to care. Eliza looked at him then, something sharp in her eyes. How much money you got left, Rowan? Enough. That's not an answer. It's enough to keep you safe. That's all that matters. She turned back to the stove, stirring something that smelled like venison and onions. You can't buy safety, not permanent. Eventually the money runs out, or the judge moves on, or Luther finds a way around it. So what do you want me to do? Nothing? I want you to be realistic. We're up against a man who sees people as property, who's got no problem selling his own blood. Legal papers might slow him down, but they won't stop him, not if he's desperate enough. Then we make sure he's not desperate. I'll pay him off. With what? You already gave him $100. How much more you think he wants? I don't know, but I'll find it. Eliza was quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. You know what I think? I think Luther doesn't want money. I think he wants control. He wants to know he can still pull my strings, still make me dance. Money's just the excuse. Rowan stood, walked to the window, looked out at the endless white. Then we cut the strings. How? I don't know yet, but we will. The conversation ended there, but the weight of it stayed in the room like a third presence. 2 days later, the weather finally broke enough for travel. The sky cleared to a hard pale blue. The temperature rose just enough that the cold wouldn't kill them, and Rowan decided they couldn't wait anymore. We leave tomorrow, he told Eliza that evening. Pack light. We'll be gone 3, maybe 4 days. What about Kale? He comes with us. Can't leave him here alone, and I don't trust anyone else to watch him. Eliza looked worried. It's a hard ride for a baby. I know, but it's harder to stay here waiting for Luther to come back. She nodded, accepting it, and started preparing. She wrapped Kale in layers, made sure they had enough cloth and bottles for the journey, packed food that wouldn't freeze. Rowan checked the horses, made sure the tack was solid, loaded the rifle and his pistol. That night, before they slept, Eliza came to him with something in her hand, a piece of paper folded small. What's this? Rowan asked. My marriage certificate, from Jacob. She pressed it into his hand. When we get to town, when we sign the new papers, I want you to burn this one. I don't want it anymore. Rowan unfolded it carefully. The paper was old, creased, the ink faded, but still readable. Jacob Hart and Eliza Moore, married August 1863, witnessed and sealed. You sure? He asked. I'm sure. That life's dead. I don't want to carry it anymore. He folded it back up, put it in his pocket. All right, I'll burn it. She nodded, turned to go, then stopped. Rowan? Thank you for this, for all of it. You don't need to thank me. Yeah, I do. She went back to the bedroom, and Rowan stayed up a while longer, holding the marriage certificate, thinking about the weight of paper and what it meant to let go of the past. They left at first light. The ride was brutal. Cold cut through their clothes no matter how many layers they wore, and the trail was treacherous with ice. Rowan led, Eliza followed, and Kale rode against her chest, wrapped so tight only his face showed. He cried for the first hour, then went quiet, sleeping or just too cold to complain. They made camp the first night in a cave Rowan knew, sheltered from the wind, big enough for a fire. He got it going while Eliza tended to Cale, checking him over, making sure he wasn't frostbitten or sick. The baby was fine, just angry and hungry. She fed him, and he settled. How much further, she asked, sitting close to the fire. Half a day if the weather holds. And if it doesn't? Then we find shelter and wait it out. Eliza pulled her coat tighter. I hate winter. Most people do. Jacob used to say winter was when the world rested, said it was peaceful. She stared into the flames. He was wrong. Winter doesn't rest. It just waits to kill you. Rowan didn't argue. He'd seen enough men die in winter to know she was right. They reached Pinewood Creek late the next afternoon. It was barely a town, just a collection of buildings clustered around a crossroads, but it had a general store, a boarding house, and most importantly, a small church with a resident preacher. Rowan led them to the boarding house first. The owner, a woman named Iris, who'd lost most of her teeth to age and poor luck, took one look at Eliza and Cale and softened. You poor dear, traveling with a baby in this cold. Come in, come in. I've got a room, small but warm. She showed them upstairs to a cramped space with a bed, a chair, and a wash basin. It was clean, though, and the fire in the small stove worked. Rowan paid for 2 nights, then told Eliza to rest while he went to find the preacher. I'm coming with you, she said. You should stay with Cale. Iris can watch him for an hour. I want to be there when we do this. She was right. This was her future they were arranging. Rowan nodded, and they left Cale with Iris, who cooed over him like he was the first baby she'd seen in years. The church was small, drafty, smelled like old wood and candle wax. The preacher was older than Rowan expected, maybe 70, with hands that shook when he held his Bible. His name was Reverend Marsh, and he seemed confused when Rowan explained what they needed. Marriage? Today? If possible, yes, sir. Well, I suppose, do you have witnesses? We can find some. Marsh looked between them, frowning. You two seem rushed. Is there a reason for haste? Eliza spoke before Rowan could. We've got a baby who needs a stable home and circumstances that won't wait. We're not asking for your blessing, Reverend, just your signature. Marsh's frown deepened, but after a moment he nodded. Very well, let me get the register. He shuffled off to a back room, leaving Rowan and Eliza standing in the empty church. It was quiet except for the wind outside and the creak of old boards. You nervous? Rowan asked. No, you? Yeah. Why? Because I'm about to promise things I'm not sure I can keep. Eliza looked at him, something unreadable in her face. Then don't promise. Just sign the paper. That's all this is. But it didn't feel like just paper. It felt heavier than that. Marsh came back with the register and 2 witnesses, parishioners who'd been in the back room doing some kind of cleaning. They were both women, middle-aged, curious but polite. They stood to the side while Marsh opened the register to a blank page. Names? He asked. Rowan Vance, Eliza Hart. Marsh wrote slowly, his hand shaking. And you both consent to this union of your own free will. Yes, Rowan said. Yes, Eliza said. Very well. By the power vested in me by the territorial church and the laws of this land, I pronounce you husband and wife. Sign here, please. Rowan signed first, his handwriting cramped and uneven. Then Eliza. Her signature was neater, more practiced. The witnesses signed below, and Marsh blotted the page, closed the register. That's it? Eliza asked. That's it. You're married. Marsh smiled, but it looked tired. May you find happiness together. They left the church as husband and wife, legally bound, and walked back to the boarding house in silence. The sun was setting, turning the snow orange and pink, and somewhere a dog was barking. You feel different? Rowan asked. No. You? No. But that was a lie. He felt the weight of it, the commitment, even if she didn't, or maybe she did and just wasn't saying. When they got back to the room, Iris had Cale fed and sleeping. Eliza thanked her, and Iris left with a knowing smile that made Rowan uncomfortable. She thinks we're a real married couple, Eliza said, sitting on the bed. We are. On paper. You know what I mean. Rowan didn't know what to say to that, so he went to the window, looked out at the darkening street. Behind him he heard Eliza moving around, settling in. I'll sleep in the chair, he said. You take the bed. Rowan, we've been sharing a cabin for over a month. I think we can manage sharing a room without being weird about it. It's different now. Why? Because some old man wrote our names in a book? Yeah, because of that. She sighed. Fine. Sleep in the chair. Freeze for all I care. But an hour later, when he was stiff and cold and regretting his decision, she threw a blanket at him without a word, and he wrapped himself in it, grateful. The next morning, they went looking for the territorial judge. Turned out he wasn't in Pinewood Creek yet, wouldn't be for another week. But there was a magistrate, a thin man named Porter, who operated out of a back office in the general store. Rowan explained the situation, Eliza's uncle trying to reclaim her, threats, harassment, the need for legal protection. Porter listened, made notes, asked questions. And you're married now? Porter asked, looking at the church register Marsh had given them. As of yesterday, Rowan confirmed. That helps. Complicates things for the uncle, legally speaking. Porter tapped his pen against the desk. I can issue a restraining writ. It won't have much teeth unless he violates it, but it creates a record. If he shows up again, you can have him arrested for harassment. What if he doesn't care about arrest? Then you defend yourself as needed. Law allows for self-defense on your own property. Porter looked at Eliza. You're sure about this? Once this writ's filed, there's no going back. You'll be officially cutting ties with your uncle. I'm sure, Eliza said. Porter nodded, filled out the paperwork, had them both sign. This'll be filed with the territorial records. Takes a few weeks, but it's official as of today. Rowan paid him $20, which hurt, but was worth it, and they left with copies of the writ. Outside, Eliza looked at the papers in her hand like they might disappear. You think this'll work? It's better than nothing. That's not reassuring. I know. They spent one more night in Pinewood Creek, and the next morning started the ride home. The weather held, cold but clear, and they made good time. Cale was fussy but manageable, and Eliza seemed quieter than usual, lost in thought. They were half a day from the cabin when Rowan spotted the smoke. It was thin, barely visible against the gray sky, but it was there, coming from the direction of his land. That's not right, he said, pulling his horse to a stop. Eliza saw it too. Could be a campfire, travelers, or Luther. They looked at each other. Rowan's hand moved to his rifle. Stay behind me, he said. If something's wrong, you take Cale and ride south. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you. Eliza, I said I'm not leaving. There wasn't time to argue. Rowan spurred his horse forward, Eliza following close. They rode hard, the smoke getting thicker, and when they broke through the tree line into the clearing, Rowan's heart stopped. The cabin was burning. Not the whole thing, not yet, but the lean-to was fully engulfed, flames tearing through the dry wood, and smoke was pouring from the main cabin's chimney. Too much smoke, wrong color. Rowan dismounted before his horse fully stopped, running toward the cabin. The door was open, swinging in the wind. Inside he could see fire spreading from the loft, where someone had clearly set it. Rowan, wait! Eliza's voice, but he wasn't stopping. He ran inside, heat slamming into him like a wall. The main room was smoky, but not burning yet. The loft, though, the loft was fully involved, flames eating through the floor, and he could see the trunk up there, Sarah's dress, everything he'd kept. Someone grabbed his arm, yanked him back. Eliza, shouting something he couldn't hear over the roar. She pulled him toward the door, and he fought her for a second before his brain caught up and he realized she was right. There was nothing to save. It was gone. They stumbled outside, coughing. Rowan turned, watched his home burn, and the rage that rose in him was black and total. Luther, he said. We don't know that. Who else? Eliza didn't answer. She was holding Cale tight, the baby screaming now, terrified by the noise and heat. Rowan walked the perimeter, looking for tracks, signs, anything. He found them near the tree line, boot prints, horse prints, leading north. 2 horses, maybe 3. Recent, within the last few hours. Luther. Had to be. Coming here while they were gone, burning what he couldn't have. We need to go, Eliza said, appearing beside him. The fire will spread if the wind picks up. We can't stay here. This is my land. And it'll still be your land tomorrow. Right now we need shelter, and this ain't it. She was right again. Rowan looked at the cabin one more time, walls starting to catch now, fire climbing, and felt something break inside him. Not grief. Grief was soft. This was harder, colder. "There's a trapper's hut about 3 miles west," he said. "It's not much, but it'll keep us alive until I figure out what to do." "What are you gonna do?" Rowan didn't answer. He mounted his horse, waited for Eliza to do the same, and they rode west as behind them his cabin burned to the ground, taking Sarah's dress and the last pieces of his old life with it. The trapper's hut was worse than Rowan remembered. One room, maybe 10 feet square, roof half caved on the south side, gaps in the walls big enough to see through. But it had a stone fireplace that still worked and 4 walls that mostly kept the wind out, which made it better than sleeping in the open. They arrived after dark, exhausted and frozen. Rowan got a fire going while Eliza tried to settle Cale, who'd been crying on and off for the last hour. The baby was cold, hungry, scared, and there wasn't much she could do about any of it except hold him and hope he wore himself out. "We can't stay here long," she said once Cale finally quieted, nursing weakly. "There's no supplies, no food except what we brought, and that won't last more than a few days." "I know." "So what's the plan?" Rowan was staring into the fire, his face hard as the stone behind it. "I'm going after him." "After who? Luther?" "Yeah." "And do what? Kill him?" "If I have to." Eliza shifted Cale to her other side, careful not to disturb him. "That's murder, Rowan. They'll hang you for it." "Not if they don't find the body." The words came out flat, emotionless, and that scared her more than if he'd been yelling. This wasn't anger. This was something colder, deliberate. "Listen to yourself," she said. "You're talking about hunting a man down and burying him in the woods. That ain't you." "How do you know what's me? You've known me 2 months." "I know you're not a killer." "Maybe I am now." Rowan stood, started pacing the small space. "He burned my home, Eliza. Everything I built, everything I had left of Sarah, gone. And for what? Because he's angry you got away? Because he wants to prove he still owns you?" He stopped, looked at her. "I'm not letting him get away with that." "So you'll throw your life away on revenge? And what happens to Cale when you're dead or locked up? What happens to me?" That stopped him. He hadn't thought past the burning, past the rage, hadn't considered what came after. Eliza continued, her voice quieter now. "I get it. I do. You want him to pay, and he should. But killing him ain't the answer. It just makes you like him, someone who solves problems with violence." "Then what do you want me to do? Nothing?" "I want you to think. Luther burned the cabin because he's desperate, because the legal papers we filed scared him. He knows he's losing control, so he's lashing out. Men like that make mistakes when they're scared. We let him keep making mistakes, keep pushing, and eventually he'll hang himself without us having to do a damn thing." Rowan sat back down, rubbed his face with both hands. "I'm tired, Eliza. Tired of running, tired of reacting, tired of being 2 steps behind." "I know. Me too." She looked down at Cale, who'd fallen asleep against her. "But we got more to protect now than just ourselves. We got him. And he needs us alive and free, not dead or imprisoned." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling, wind whistling through the gaps in the walls. Finally, Rowan spoke. "All right, we do it your way. But if Luther shows his face again, I'm not holding back. I'll do what needs doing." "Fair enough." They spent a cold, miserable night in the hut. Rowan took the first watch, sitting near the door with his rifle, jumping at every sound. Eliza tried to sleep, but couldn't. Her mind racing through options and scenarios, none of them good. By morning, they'd made a plan. They'd ride to the nearest settlement, a mining camp called Copper Ridge about a day east, and see about work and shelter until they could figure out something more permanent. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than freezing to death in a collapsing hut. They packed up what little they had and started riding just after dawn. The sky was overcast, threatening snow, and the temperature had dropped overnight. Cale was bundled so tight only his nose showed, and he whimpered constantly, a thin sound that cut through the silence like a knife. "He's getting sick," Eliza said around midday. "His breathing's not right." Rowan rode closer, listened. She was right. There was a rattle in Cale's chest, wet and rough. "How bad?" "I don't know yet, but we need to get him somewhere warm soon. This cold's going to kill him if we're not careful." They pushed the horses harder, riding through the afternoon without stopping. By the time they reached Copper Ridge, the sun was setting and Cale's breathing had gotten worse. He was coughing now, a deep barking sound that made his whole body shake. Copper Ridge wasn't much. A collection of tents and rough-built structures clinging to a hillside, everything covered in mud and mining debris. But it had a boarding house, and the woman who ran it took one look at Kyle and waved them inside without asking for payment up front. "Get that baby warm," she said, her voice sharp with concern. "Third room on the left, fire's already going. I'll bring hot water and clean cloths." Her name was Josephine, and she didn't ask questions. Just helped Eliza strip Cale down to check him over while Rowan stood uselessly by the door, watching. The baby's chest was tight, ribs visible with each labored breath. His skin was hot to the touch, fever burning through him. When Eliza tried to get him to nurse, he turned his head away, too exhausted to even try. "It's pneumonia," Josephine said quietly. "Or close to it. I've seen it before in babies. Sometimes they pull through, sometimes they don't." "What do we do?" Eliza's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "Keep him warm. Keep him hydrated. Try to get fluids in him however you can. Steam helps. Boil water. Let him breathe the vapor. And pray." Eliza didn't pray. She got to work instead. Rowan helped, following her instructions, boiling water, bringing clean cloths, holding Cale when she needed both hands free. They worked through the night, taking turns, trying everything they could think of. Around 3 in the morning, Cale started seizing. His little body went rigid, back arching, and for a horrible moment, Eliza thought he was dying right there in her arms. "Rowan!" Her voice cracked with panic. He was beside her in an instant, helping her lay Cale down, turn him on his side so he wouldn't choke. The seizure lasted maybe 30 seconds, but felt like hours. When it finally stopped, Cale went limp, breathing so shallow it was almost invisible. "We're losing him," Eliza whispered. No, we're not." Rowan grabbed the basin of steaming water, brought it close to Cale's face. "Breathe, boy. Come on, breathe." Nothing happened. Then slowly, Cale's chest rose. A small breath, barely there, but real. Then another. The rattle was worse now, liquid and thick, but he was breathing. Eliza grabbed a clean cloth, dipped it in the hot water, wrung it out, and laid it across Cale's chest. "We need to break the fever. If we don't, he'll seize again, and next time—" She didn't finish. Didn't need to. They worked through the rest of the night, changing out the cloths, keeping the steam going, trying desperately to get water into Cale drop by drop. Rowan had never felt so helpless in his life. He was a man who solved problems with his hands, with action, but there was nothing to build here, nothing to fight. Just a baby struggling to breathe and 2 adults trying to will him to live. Dawn came gray and cold. Cale was still alive, still breathing, but he hadn't improved. If anything, he was worse. The fever hadn't broken, and his skin had taken on a bluish tint that made Rowan's stomach turn. Josephine brought breakfast, bread and coffee, but neither of them could eat. They just kept working, kept trying, while outside the mining camp woke up and went about its business, oblivious. Around noon, something changed. Cale's breathing got faster, more desperate, and then he coughed. A deep, violent cough that brought up fluid, thick and greenish. Eliza grabbed a cloth, wiped his mouth, and he coughed again and again, each one sounding like it might tear him apart. But when the coughing finally stopped, his breathing was clearer. Not good, but better. The rattle was less pronounced. "That's good, right?" Rowan asked. "Maybe, if he can keep clearing it out." Eliza wiped Cale's face, felt his forehead. "Fever's still high, though." They kept at it. More steam, more cloths, more desperate attempts to get water into him. Hours blurred together. At some point, Rowan realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd slept. Eliza looked worse. Dark circles under her eyes, hair falling out of its braid, hands raw from wringing out hot cloths. "You need to rest," he told her. "So do you." "I'll rest when he's better." "That's stupid." "Yeah, well." Night came again, their second night in Copper Ridge, and Cale was still fighting. Rowan had started to wonder if the baby was tougher than both of them combined. He'd been through so much, nearly starved, now this, and he was still here, still breathing, still refusing to give up. Around midnight, the fever broke. Rowan was half asleep in the chair when he heard Eliza make a sound. Not quite a cry, not quite a laugh. "Rowan, feel." He came over, touched Cale's forehead. Cool. Not cold, not clammy. Just normal. The baby's eyes were closed, his breathing easier, and he looked like he was actually sleeping instead of fighting for his life. "Is he—" "He's through the worst of it," Eliza said, and her voice was thick with exhaustion and relief. "Fever broke. If he makes it through the night without it coming back, he'll live." Rowan sat down hard, all the strength going out of his legs. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm hopeful, and that's more than I've been in 2 days." They watched Cale sleep, neither of them willing to look away. Like if they stopped paying attention, he might slip back toward death. But he didn't. He just slept, breathing steady, chest rising and falling in a rhythm that sounded almost peaceful. "You did good," Rowan said quietly. "We did good." "No, this was you. I didn't know what to do. You saved him." Eliza shook her head. "I just did what needed doing, same as you would have. I wouldn't have known how. Then you'd have figured it out. That's what people do when they got something worth saving." They sat together in the quiet, and somewhere around dawn, Rowan fell asleep in the chair. When he woke, sunlight was streaming through the window and Eliza was feeding Kyle, who was awake and nursing like he'd never been sick at all. "He's eating," Rowan said, stupid with relief. "Has been for about an hour. Won't stop." Eliza smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her since the cabin burned. "I think he's making up for lost time." Cale finished eating and promptly fell back asleep, milk drunk and content. Eliza laid him in the makeshift cradle Josephine had provided, and then she stood, stretched, winced as something in her back cracked. "I need to sleep for about a week," she said. "Me too. But we can't. We need to figure out what comes next." Rowan had been thinking about that during the long hours of Cale's illness, turning it over in his mind between bouts of terror. "We stay here for now. I'll find work. Mining, hauling, whatever pays. Save up enough to rebuild." "Rebuild where?" "The land's still yours, but Luther knows where it is. He'll just burn it down again." "Maybe. Or maybe he thinks he's won. He burned us out, scattered us. Could be he figures that's enough." Eliza looked skeptical. "You really believe that?" "No, but I'm hoping." She sat down on the edge of the bed, rubbed her eyes. "We need a real plan, Rowan. Something more than just hoping Luther gives up. Because men like him don't give up. They push until someone pushes back harder. Then we push back. How?" Before Rowan could answer, there was a knock on the door. He tensed, hand moving instinctively to where his knife should be, except he'd left it by the wash basin. "Who is it?" he called. "Josephine? I've got someone here wants to talk to you." Rowan exchanged a glance with Eliza, then opened the door. Josephine stood there with a man Rowan didn't recognize, middle-aged, well-dressed for a mining camp, with the kind of eyes that saw everything. "This is Mr. Caldwell," Josephine said. "He runs the mining operation here. Said he heard about you and wanted to speak." Caldwell extended a hand. "Rowan Vance? Thomas Caldwell. Mind if I come in?" Rowan shook his hand, wary. "What's this about?" "A proposition? May I?" Caldwell gestured inside. Rowan stepped back, let him enter. Caldwell took in the room, the sick baby, the exhausted parents, the pile of soiled cloths, and nodded like it confirmed something. "I'll be direct," Caldwell said. "I need men. Good men. Men who work hard and don't cause trouble. Josephine tells me you've been here 2 days, haven't caused any problems, paid what you owe, and spent the whole time caring for a sick child. That tells me you're the kind of man I need." "I'm not a miner," Rowan said. "Don't need you to be. I need someone to oversee timber operations. We're expanding, need lumber for new structures, shoring up tunnels. It's hard work, but it pays $30 a month plus housing." $30. More than Rowan had made in a good trapping season. He looked at Eliza, who was watching Caldwell with cautious interest. "What kind of housing?" she asked. "Small cabin on the south edge of camp, 2 rooms, solid construction, comes with the job. Not much, but it's warm and dry." "And if we don't work out?" Rowan asked. "Then you leave and I find someone else. But I got a feeling about you, Vance. Man who fights that hard to keep a baby alive is a man who'll fight hard for anything he commits to. I need that kind of dedication. Rowan wanted to say yes immediately, but he forced himself to think it through. The job would keep them fed, housed, give them a base to work from. But it also meant staying in Copper Ridge, being visible, making it easier for Luther to find them if he came looking. On the other hand, running forever wasn't an option. At some point, they had to stand still long enough to build something. "Can I have a day to think about it?" Rowan asked. "Take 2, but if you're interested, come find me at the main office." Caldwell tipped his hat to Eliza. "Ma'am, hope your boy recovers fully." He left and Josephine followed, closing the door behind them. Eliza spoke first. "We should take it." "You sure? Once we settle here, we're committed. Can't just pick up and run if Luther shows up." "Good. I'm tired of running. We take the job, we build a life here, and if Luther comes, we deal with him. But we do it from a position of strength, not desperation." Rowan thought about it, then nodded. "All right, we'll take it." They spent the next day recovering, sleeping in shifts while Cale continued to improve. By the evening of the 3rd day, the baby was almost back to normal, fussy and demanding, but alive and strong. Eliza declared him out of danger, and Rowan felt something in his chest loosen that had been tight since they'd found the cabin burning. The next morning, he went to Caldwell's office and accepted the job. They moved into the cabin that afternoon, small, like Caldwell had said, but well-built, with a good stove and shutters that actually kept the wind out. It was bigger than the trapper's hut and cleaner than the boarding house, and when Eliza walked in and looked around, Rowan saw something in her face he hadn't seen before. Hope. Actual, real hope. "This'll do," she said quietly. "Yeah, it will." They settled in quickly. Rowan started work the next day, hard labor, directing men in timber cutting, making sure the logs were the right size and quality for Caldwell's needs. It was exhausting but straightforward, and he was good at it. The men respected him, listened when he talked, and didn't ask too many questions about his past. Eliza made the cabin into a home. She cooked, cleaned, took care of Cale, and slowly started talking to the other women in camp. They were rough women mostly, wives and daughters of miners, but they were kind to her, taught her tricks for managing in a mining camp, shared food when supplies ran short. For 3 weeks, life was almost normal. Rowan worked, came home exhausted, ate whatever Eliza had made, played with Cale until the baby fell asleep, then collapsed into bed. They didn't talk much about Luther or the burned cabin or what might be coming. They just lived, day by day, trying to build something solid. Then Luther found them. Rowan was at the timber site when one of the younger workers, a kid named Danny, came running up, out of breath. "Boss, there's men at your cabin, 3 of them, asking for your wife." Rowan dropped the axe he'd been sharpening and ran. The cabin was a 1/4 mile from the timber site, and he covered the distance in under 2 minutes, heart pounding, rifle bouncing against his back. When he got there, Eliza was standing in the doorway, Cale in her arms, facing down 3 men on horseback. Luther was in the center, flanked by 2 others Rowan didn't recognize. Big men, the kind you hired when you needed muscle. "Don't care what papers you got," Luther was saying. "She's blood, and blood don't get sold off permanent. Now hand over the boy, and we can all go home peaceful." "The boy's not yours," Eliza said, voice steady despite the fear Rowan could see in her posture. "Didn't say he was, but you are, and where you go, he goes." Luther saw Rowan approaching and smiled. "There's the husband. How's married life treating you, Vance?" Rowan didn't answer. He positioned himself between the horses and Eliza, rifle held loose but ready. "You need to leave," he said. "I need to leave? This is public land, friend. I got as much right to be here as you. Not when you're threatening my wife." "Threatening? I'm just talking, having a conversation with family." Luther leaned forward in his saddle. "See, here's the thing. I've been doing some thinking since our last chat, and I realized I made a mistake. I undervalued Eliza's talents, so I'm here to correct that mistake. I'll give you $200, twice what you paid, and we all walk away happy." "She's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, Vance. Just a matter of price." "Not her. Not anymore." Luther's smile faded. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Good." One of the big men, the one on Luther's left, started to dismount. Rowan raised the rifle, not quite pointing it, but the threat clear. "I wouldn't," Rowan said quietly. The man stopped, looked at Luther. Luther waved him back up. You gonna shoot me, Vance? In front of all these witnesses? Luther gestured at the miners who'd started gathering, drawn by the commotion. That'd be murder. They'd hang you for it. Maybe. Or maybe they'd call it self-defense. You're on my property, threatening my family. Law's pretty clear on what a man can do in that situation. This ain't your property. It's company land that I'm leasing, which makes it mine for legal purposes. Rowan took a step forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn those horses around and ride out, and you're not going to come back, ever. Because if I see you again, I won't wait for you to make the first move. I'll just shoot you and deal with the consequences after. Luther stared at him, calculating. The two big men looked nervous now, hands near their weapons, but not quite reaching. You've changed, Vance, Luther said finally. When I sold you Eliza, you were desperate, pathetic. Now you're acting like you got something to protect. I do. That baby? He ain't even yours. You know that, right? That's just some woman's dead husband's. He's mine, Rowan interrupted, voice hard as iron. I held him when he was dying. I fought to keep him alive. I've earned him in ways you'll never understand. So yeah, he's mine. They both are. And you don't get to take them. Luther was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. All right, Vance, you win this round. But this ain't over. Not by a long shot. He turned his horse. Come on, boys. Let's go find somewhere more hospitable. They rode off slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone saw they weren't running. Rowan kept the rifle up until they disappeared into the trees, then lowered it and turned to Eliza. She was shaking. Cale was crying, sensing her fear. He's not going to stop, she said. I know. We can't keep doing this, living in fear, waiting for him to show up again. I know. Around them, the miners were dispersing, heading back to work, the show over. But Rowan could feel their eyes, their judgment. Some looked sympathetic. Others just looked curious. None of them looked like they'd stand with him if Luther came back with more men. They were on their own. That night, after Cale was asleep, Rowan and Eliza sat at the small table in the cabin and finally had the conversation they'd been avoiding. We can't stay here, Eliza said. Not if Luther knows where we are. We can't keep running either. Eventually we run out of places to go. So what do we do? Rowan had been thinking about this all evening, turning it over. We end it. Permanently. You mean kill him? I mean make it so he can't come after us anymore. Whether that's through law or... He trailed off. Through murder. If necessary, yeah. Eliza was quiet. Then, I won't ask you to do that. Won't ask you to become that kind of man. You're not asking, I'm choosing. Why? Because of me? Because of Cale? We're not worth you throwing your life away. Yes, you are. Rowan looked at her directly. You saved my son when I couldn't. You've stood by us through everything. You're my wife on paper and in every way that matters. So yeah, you're worth it. Tears welled in Eliza's eyes, but she blinked them back. There's got to be another way. Then help me find it, because I'm out of ideas that don't end with Luther dead or us running forever. They sat in silence, the weight of it pressing down on them both. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Finally, Eliza spoke. What if we give him what he wants? What? Not me, not Cale, but what he really wants. Money, respect, power. What if we give him that instead? How? I don't know yet. But Luther's motivated by greed. If we can find a way to make it more profitable for him to leave us alone than to keep coming after us. It was a slim chance, but it was better than murder or running. Rowan nodded slowly. All right, we'll try it your way first. But if it doesn't work, I know. Then you do what you have to do. They went to bed that night with no answers, only questions, and the knowledge that time was running out. 3 days passed with no sign of Luther. Rowan worked longer hours than Caldwell required, partly because they needed the money, and partly because staying busy kept his mind from spiraling. Every shadow in the trees looked like riders. Every unfamiliar voice in camp made his hand move toward the rifle he now carried everywhere. Eliza spent those days asking questions. She talked to the women in camp, the shopkeepers, anyone who might know something useful. On the 4th day, she came home with information. Luther's staying at a boarding house in Silver Point, she said, setting a pot of stew on the table. About 10 miles south. He's been asking around about mining claims, looking for partners. Rowan looked up from where he was playing with Cale on the floor. Partners for what? That's what I couldn't figure out. But one of the women, Martha, works at the company store. She said Luther's been flashing money around. A lot of it. More than a man like him should have. Maybe he struck it lucky. Or maybe he's planning something that needs capital. Eliza sat down, wiped her hands on her apron. I've been thinking about what I said the other night, about giving him what he wants. What if what he really wants isn't me at all? What if I'm just a means to an end? Keep talking. Luther's greedy, but he's not stupid. He sold me for $100 when he could have gotten more if he'd waited, found the right buyer. That tells me he needed money fast for something specific. Then he came back trying to renegotiate, talking about my value and talents. But what if that was just cover? What if he needs me for something else entirely? Rowan picked Cale up, settled the baby on his knee. Like what? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's worth more to him than $100. Maybe worth more than $200. She leaned forward. What if we found out what he's planning and we either gave it to him or made sure he couldn't get it? Either way, he'd have no reason to keep bothering us. It was thin reasoning, built on guesses and speculation, but it was better than waiting for Luther to make the next move. Rowan nodded slowly. How do we find out what he's planning? We ask him. He's not going to tell us. Not directly, but people talk, especially when they're drinking. There's a saloon in Silver Point, the Silver Bell. Martha says Luther drinks there most nights, brags about his deals to anyone who will listen. Eliza's eyes were sharp now, calculating. I could go. Sit in a corner, listen. Men don't notice women when they're deep in their cups. Absolutely not. You're not going anywhere near him. Then you go. He knows my face. So we send someone else. Someone he doesn't know, someone who can blend in. They both went quiet, thinking. Cale grabbed at Rowan's beard, and he gently extracted the tiny fingers, kissed them. Danny, Rowan said finally, the kid who works with you? Yeah, he's young, forgettable. Luther wouldn't look twice at him, and Danny owes me. I kept him from getting crushed by a falling log last week. He'd do it if I asked. You trust him? Far as I trust anyone. Which ain't much, but it's something. Eliza considered it. All right, talk to him. See if he'll do it. But we need to be careful. If Luther catches on that we're looking into his business, he'll know we're planning something. The next day, Rowan pulled Danny aside during the lunch break. The kid was maybe 20, rail thin, with a nervous energy that made him seem younger. He listened to Rowan's proposal while chewing on hardtack. You want me to spy on some guy? Danny asked. Not spy, just listen. Go to the saloon, have a drink, see what you hear. If this Luther fellow starts talking about business, you pay attention, that's all. What's in it for me? $10. Danny's eyes went wide. $10 for one night of drinking? $10 for keeping your mouth shut about it after, too. This stays between us. What'd this guy do to you? That's my business. You in or not? Danny thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. Yeah, all right. I'm in. That night, Danny rode to Silver Point. Rowan waited at home, pacing, while Eliza tried to keep busy with mending, and Cale occupied himself by pulling everything off the shelf he could reach. The hours crawled past. Rowan kept checking the window, watching for Danny's return, imagining every possible way this could go wrong. Danny came back just after midnight, smelling like whiskey and looking pleased with himself. Did you find him? Rowan asked the moment the kid walked in. Found him, listened to him, even bought him a drink. Danny grinned. Man talks a lot when he's drinking. Goes on and on about how he's about to be rich, how he's got a deal in the works that's going to set him up for life. What kind of deal? Something about a mining claim. Apparently there's a vein of silver north of here that somebody found but couldn't work because they didn't have the capital. Luther's been buying up shares, promising investors a huge return once they start pulling ore out. Rowan exchanged a glance with Eliza. Did he say where this claim is? Yeah, he was real specific about it. Said it's up near Widow's Creek on the old Morrison property. Kept saying the Morrison family didn't know what they had, that he was going to buy them out before they realized. Anything else? Just that he needs more money to finalize the deal. Said he's got most of it, but he's still short about $300. That's why he's been trying to drum up more investors. $300. About what he'd get if he sold Eliza to wealthy families as some kind of miracle worker for sick children. Suddenly, Luther's persistence made horrible sense. After Danny left with his payment and strict instructions to forget this conversation ever happened, Rowan turned to Eliza. He needs you to make his mining deal work. Looks like it. So we've got three options. We give him the money, we ruin the deal, or we buy the claim out from under him. Eliza laughed, but there was no humor in it. We don't have $300, Rowan. We barely have 30. I know, but Caldwell might. You going to ask your boss to fund a mining claim? No, I'm going to propose a partnership. Caldwell's always looking for new opportunities. If the Morrison claim is as good as Luther thinks, Caldwell would want in on it, and if it's not, then Luther's deal falls apart and he's got no reason to need you anymore. That's a lot of ifs. You got a better idea? She didn't. So the next morning, Rowan went to Caldwell's office and made his pitch. The mining boss listened, asked pointed questions about the Morrison property, the quality of the silver supposedly there, Luther's financial situation. This uncle of your wife's, Caldwell said when Rowan finished. He's the one who's been causing you trouble. Yes, sir. And you think buying this claim will get him off your back? I think it might, or at least it'll show us what he's really after. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Morrison's land has been worked before. Didn't produce much, but there's always a chance they didn't dig deep enough, didn't look in the right places. He paused. All right, I'll front the money to buy the claim, but you're coming in as a partner, 10% stake. You'll work it on your off days, and if we strike silver, we split accordingly. Deal? Rowan hadn't expected that. Sir, I don't have money for a stake. You've got labor. That's worth something, and you brought me the information. That's worth something too. Caldwell extended his hand. Deal? They shook. Caldwell drafted the paperwork that afternoon, and 2 days later they rode out to the Morrison property together with a company lawyer and enough money to make an offer the Morrison family couldn't refuse. The Morrisons were an older couple, their children grown and gone, scraping by on what little their land produced. When Caldwell laid $400 in gold on their kitchen table, old Mr. Morrison's hands shook. This is for the mineral rights only, the lawyer explained. You keep the land, the house, everything else. We're just buying the right to mine. And you'll leave the land as you found it when you're done? Mrs. Morrison asked. Best we can, Caldwell said. Can't promise it'll be pretty, but we won't wreck your home. They signed. The claim was filed with the territorial office the same day, beating Luther's attempt by less than 6 hours. Word traveled fast in the mining camps. By nightfall, everyone knew about Caldwell's purchase, including Luther. He showed up at Rowan's cabin the next morning, flanked by the same 2 big men as before. But this time he didn't dismount, just sat his horse in the yard staring at the cabin door until Rowan came out. You son of a bitch, Luther said, his voice tight with controlled rage. You knew about my deal. I knew you needed money, Rowan said. Figured out why. That claim was mine. I had investors lined up, papers ready to file. But you didn't file them. We did. Rowan crossed his arms. It's legal, Luther. The claim's ours now. You got no standing to complain. Luther's jaw worked. You did this to spite me. I did this to end this. You wanted money for your mining scheme, and now you can't get it through Eliza, so leave her alone. Leave us alone. Go find your fortune somewhere else. You think it's that easy? You think I'm just going to walk away because you stole my claim? I didn't steal nothing. I bought it fair. Rowan took a step forward. But yeah, I think you'll walk away. Because what's your alternative? You keep coming after us. You waste time and money you don't have. You let it go, you cut your losses and move on to the next scheme. I know which one makes more sense. Luther was breathing hard, hands tight on the reins. For a moment, Rowan thought he might actually charge the cabin, try to force a confrontation. But then something shifted in the man's face. Not acceptance, exactly, more like cold calculation. You're right, Luther said finally. Doesn't make sense to keep chasing what I can't catch. He turned his horse. But we're not done, Vance. Someday you'll slip. Someday you'll need something, and I'll be there. And when that day comes, you'll wish you'd been more generous. He rode off. The two big men followed. Rowan watched until they disappeared, then went back inside where Eliza was waiting with Cale. "Is it over?" she asked. "Maybe. For now." "You don't sound convinced." "Because I'm not. Men like Luther don't forgive. They just wait." Eliza sat down, settled Cale on her lap. "Then we'll wait too, and we'll be ready." They didn't see Luther again for 3 weeks. In that time, Rowan worked the Morrison claim on his days off, digging test holes, following veins of rock that might or might not contain silver. Caldwell sent a surveyor who confirmed there was silver there, but not much. Enough to maybe turn a small profit if they worked it carefully, but nothing like the fortune Luther had been promising his investors. Probably why Luther needed so much capital, the surveyor said. He'd have had to dig deep, work it for months before seeing any return. Most investors don't have that kind of patience. So Luther's big deal had been a gamble from the start. Rowan felt a grim satisfaction in that. They'd saved themselves and kept Luther from dragging other people into his schemes. Life settled into a rhythm again. Rowan worked, Eliza managed the household, and Kyle, who was growing faster than seemed possible. The baby was sitting up now, making sounds that almost seemed like words, grabbing at everything in reach. He laughed when Rowan came home, reached for Eliza when he was tired, and had completely taken over their lives in a way that felt both exhausting and right. One evening in late February, Eliza was cooking when she suddenly stopped, hand going to her stomach. "You all right?" Rowan asked, looking up from where he was entertaining Cale. "Yeah, She stopped again. "Rowan, when was the last time I had my monthly?" He stared at her. I don't keep track of that." "I do, or I usually do, but I just realized it's been—" She counted on her fingers, face going pale. 8 weeks. Maybe 9. The implication hit him like a sledgehammer. "You think you're—" "I don't know. Maybe. Could be stress, could be poor eating, could be—" She sat down hard. "Could be a baby." They looked at each other across the small cabin, this possibility hanging between them. They hadn't been intimate. Not once. The marriage was still just paper, an arrangement for protection. But Eliza was living in his house, sharing his life, and now maybe carrying his child. Except that wasn't possible. "We haven't—" Rowan started. "I know. So either I'm wrong about the timing, or—" She pressed her hand harder against her stomach. "Or this is Thomas. Some kind of delayed reaction from the grief. Body thinking it's still pregnant even though he's dead. That can happen?" "I don't know. I'm not a doctor." Her voice cracked. "I can't do this again, Rowan. I can't lose another baby. I can't—" He was across the room in 3 steps, pulling her into an awkward embrace while Cale protested at being jostled. "Hey, you don't know anything yet. Could be nothing, could be something, but whatever it is, we'll handle it." "How? We can barely manage with Cale. How are we supposed to—" "We'll figure it out, same way we've figured everything else out." He pulled back, looked at her directly. "And if you are pregnant, if there is a baby, we'll love it. We'll keep it safe. We'll do better than we did before." Eliza's eyes were wet. "You say that like it's easy." "Nothing about this is easy, but we've survived everything else. We'll survive this too." She nodded, not quite believing, but wanting to. They stayed like that for a while, holding each other while Cale fussed and the stew started to burn, and outside the sun set on another day of their complicated, messy life. The next week, Eliza rode to Silver Point to see the doctor there. She came back with confirmation. 12 weeks, she said, her voice flat. Give or take. So it happened before Thomas died, before Jacob died. I just didn't know because everything was so chaotic, Rowan finished. Yeah. She sat at the table, staring at nothing. Rowan wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know how. This baby was a ghost from her old life, a reminder of everything she'd lost. It wasn't his, had nothing to do with him, and yet here they were, bound together by circumstances neither of them had chosen. What do you want to do? He asked, finally. What do you mean? I mean, this baby. Do you want it? Eliza looked at him, something sharp in her eyes. What kind of question is that? An honest one. You didn't choose this. You didn't choose any of this. If you want to, I don't know, go somewhere else, start over without you and Cale?
Yeah.
She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was steady. That baby in there, it's all I got left of Jacob, of the life I had before. And yeah, it scares me. Terrifies me, actually. But I'm not getting rid of it, and I'm not leaving. This is my family now. You and Cale and this baby. For better or worse. For better or worse, Rowan echoed. That's what we said when we got married. Yeah, well, guess we meant it more than we thought. They both laughed, small and bitter, but real. Cale, sensing the change in mood, started babbling happily, and they turned their attention to him, grateful for the distraction. The pregnancy progressed. Eliza got sick in the mornings, tired in the afternoons, but kept working. The women in camp rallied around her once word got out, bringing food and advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Rowan built a second cradle in his spare time, working by candlelight after Cale was asleep. Everything should have been settling into place, but Rowan couldn't shake the feeling that they were waiting for something. Some other shoe to drop. It came in early April. Rowan was at the timber site when Caldwell rode up, his face grim. Vance, need to talk to you. They stepped away from the other workers. Caldwell dismounted, pulled an envelope from his coat. This came for you at the main office, from the territorial marshal. Rowan's stomach dropped. He opened the envelope, scanned the letter inside. The words blurred together, but certain phrases stood out. Formal complaint, illegal land seizure, misrepresentation of ownership, Luther Gaines, plaintiff. He's suing me, Rowan said. Suing the company, technically, claims we bought the Morrison property under false pretenses, that he had a prior claim we ignored. Caldwell's jaw was tight. It's bullshit, but he's got lawyers. Good ones from the sound of it. Better than what we've got. What does this mean? Means we go to court. Means we have to prove we bought the claim legally, that Luther didn't have standing. If we lose, we forfeit the property and pay damages. Caldwell paused. And you lose your stake. I don't care about the stake. What about Eliza? What about... He's also filed a separate complaint. Says you coerced his niece into an illegal marriage, that she was sold under duress and the marriage should be annulled. He's asking for custody of the child, Cale, claiming you're an unfit guardian. The world tilted. Rowan grabbed the fence post to steady himself. He can't do that. He can try. Whether it'll work is another question, but he can definitely try. Caldwell put a hand on Rowan's shoulder. I'm sorry. I'll do what I can, but this is above my pay grade. You need a lawyer. A good one. I don't have money for a lawyer. Then find it, because if you don't fight this, you'll lose everything. Rowan rode home in a daze. When he told Eliza, she went white. He's trying to take Cale? That's what the filing says. On what grounds? That I'm unfit. That the marriage is illegal, which means I've got no legal claim to him. Eliza stood up, started pacing. The marriage isn't illegal. We filed the papers, did everything right. Doesn't matter. He's claiming you were under duress when you signed, that I forced you into it. If a judge believes that, the whole thing falls apart. So we prove I wasn't under duress. We testify. We bring witnesses. Who? The preacher who married us? The magistrate who filed the restraining order? They'll just say they took our word for it, didn't investigate. Rowan ran his hands through his hair. Luther's smart. He's attacking from every angle, trying to find a weak point. Then we defend from every angle. With what? We don't have money for lawyers, don't have influence, don't have anything except... He stopped. Except what? Rowan was thinking, pieces clicking into place. Except the truth and people who'll vouch for it. Who? Caldwell, Josephine, the women in camp who've seen how you are with Cale. Hell, even Danny. We get them to testify that you're a good mother, that Cale's thriving, that there's no duress. We bury Luther in witnesses. That might not be enough. Then we make it enough. We fight him the same way we fought everything else, by refusing to give up. Eliza nodded slowly. All right, we fight. They spent the next week preparing. Rowan talked to Caldwell, who agreed to testify and fronted money for a lawyer, not a good one, but competent enough. Eliza gathered statements from the camp women, detailed accounts of how she cared for Cale, how the baby had thrived under her care. They documented everything. The marriage certificate, the restraining order, the medical records from Cale's illness. The court date was set for late April, in Silver Point. They rode there 2 days early, wanting time to prepare. The lawyer, a tired-looking man named Breslin, met with them in his cramped office. "This is going to be ugly," Breslin said after reviewing their materials. "Gaines has money behind him now. Those investors he was courting for the mining deal, they've thrown in with him, probably hoping to recoup their losses if he wins. His lawyer's named Thornton, and he's got a reputation for winning ugly cases." "Can we beat him?" Rowan asked. "Honestly, I don't know. Your case is strong on some points, weak on others. The marriage was legal, but the circumstances around it, buying a widow, the speed of it, that'll look bad to a judge. The claim on Cale is even trickier. You're not his biological father, and without a formal adoption, your legal standing is questionable. So what do? We tell the truth and hope it's enough." The trial started on a Wednesday morning in a makeshift courtroom above the general store. The judge was an old territorial circuit rider named Hennessy, known for being fair but strict. Luther sat at the plaintiff's table with Thornton, looking smug. Rowan and Eliza sat with Breslin, Cale between them, the baby mercifully quiet. Thornton went first, laying out Luther's case with practiced precision. He painted Rowan as a desperate man who'd taken advantage of a grieving widow, forced her into marriage, and claimed a child that wasn't his. He called witnesses, 2 of Luther's investor friends who testified they'd seen Eliza looking distressed and coerced when they'd visited Copper Ridge. It was all lies, but it sounded convincing. Then Breslin presented their side. He called Caldwell, who testified about Rowan's character, his work ethic, his dedication to his family. He called Josephine, who described how Eliza had fought to save Kyle during his illness. He called 3 women from the mining camp who swore Eliza was a devoted mother, that Cale was happy and healthy. Finally, he called Eliza herself. She took the stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Thornton cross-examined her viciously, trying to trip her up, make her admit to being coerced, but Eliza held firm. "Did Rowan Vance force you to marry him?" Thornton demanded. "No. But you married him mere weeks after arriving at his cabin. Isn't that suspicious?" "We married for legal protection. My uncle, Luther Gaines, was threatening to take me back, to use me to make money. Marriage made that harder." "So you used Mr. Vance?" "We used each other. That's what marriage is, isn't it? 2 people trying to survive together." Thornton's face reddened. "And the child? Cale Vance? He's not your biological son, is he?" "No, but I've raised him since he was dying. I fed him, cared for him, loved him. Biology doesn't make a parent, choice does." "Yet you're carrying another child. Your late husband's child. Doesn't that complicate your commitment to Cale?" Eliza's hand went to her stomach, protective. "No, it means Cale will have a sibling, a family, something every child deserves." Thornton tried more angles, but Eliza didn't break. When she finally stepped down, Rowan saw exhaustion in her face, but also something else. Pride. She'd stood up to Luther's lawyer and won. The judge called a recess. They waited outside while Hennessy deliberated, the minutes stretching into hours. Cale got fussy, and Eliza walked him around the street, humming. Rowan stood with Breslin, trying not to imagine what would happen if they lost. Finally, Hennessy called them back in. "I've reviewed the evidence and testimony," the judge said, his voice gravelly with age. "This is a complicated case with no clear precedents. However, the law is clear on several points." Rowan held his breath. "First, regarding the marriage, I find no evidence of coercion. Mrs. Vance testified credibly that the marriage was entered into willingly for mutual benefit. The marriage stands." Luther half stood, but Thornton pulled him back down. "Second, regarding the mining claim, Mr. Gaines filed his complaint after the claim was already purchased and registered. He has no standing to challenge ownership after the fact. The claim belongs to Caldwell Mining Company and its partners." Luther's face was turning red. "Third, and most important, regarding custody of the minor child, Cale Vance. I've heard testimony about Mr. Vance's dedication as a father and Mrs. Vance's skill as a mother. I've seen the medical records showing the child's improvement under their care. While the biological relationship is absent, the familial bond is clearly present." Hennessy paused. "Therefore, I'm granting the Vances full legal custody of Cale with the stipulation that they file formal adoption papers within 60 days. Mr. Gaines's claim is denied. The gavel came down. Rowan felt his knees go weak. They'd won. Luther stood, shouting something about appeals and injustice, but Thornton was already packing up, clearly done with the case. The judge had Luther removed from the courtroom, still yelling, and suddenly it was over. Breslin shook Rowan's hand. "Congratulations. You've got a family." Outside, Rowan and Eliza stood on the street, Cale in Eliza's arms, just breathing. Around them, Silver Point went about its business, oblivious to the battle that had just been fought and won. "We need to file those adoption papers," Eliza said finally. "Yeah. And figure out how to pay Breslin." "Yeah. And get home before dark." "Yeah." She looked at him. "You all right?" Rowan thought about it. His cabin was gone. His savings were depleted. He was about to be a father to 2 children, one adopted and one not even born yet. Luther was still out there, probably planning his next move. But Eliza was his wife. Cale was his son. They had a future, messy and uncertain, but theirs. "Yeah," he said. "I'm all right." They rode home that evening, all 3 of them, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Rowan let himself believe it might actually work out. They filed the adoption papers 3 weeks later, standing in the same courthouse where they'd fought for custody. The clerk was a young woman with ink-stained fingers who barely looked at them before stamping the documents and handing them back. "Congratulations," she said, already moving on to the next person in line. "Your son's legally yours now." Rowan stared at the papers, at his name and Eliza's written next to Cale's, making it official, making it real. He'd been Cale's father in every way that mattered for months now, but seeing it written down felt different, permanent. "We should celebrate," Eliza said, as they walked out into the spring sunshine. She was showing now, her belly rounding under her dress, and she moved slower than she used to. "How?" "I don't know. Buy Cale something he doesn't need. Have a decent meal somewhere that isn't our kitchen." Marcin, they ended up at a small restaurant, the kind of place that served beef stew and called it fancy. Cale made a mess of the bread they gave him, and Eliza ate like she'd been starving for weeks, and Rowan just watched them both, trying to memorize the moment. "What?" Eliza asked, catching him staring. "Nothing, just thinking." "About what?" "About how this time last year, I was alone in a cabin with a dying baby, thinking I was going to lose everything." He paused. "Now look at us." Eliza reached across the table, squeezed his hand. "Yeah, look at us." They rode back to Copper Ridge that afternoon, the adoption papers tucked safely in Rowan's coat pocket. The mining camp had grown since they'd arrived. More tents, more structures, more people chasing the promise of silver and gold. Their cabin sat on the edge of it all, small but solid. And when Rowan saw it, he felt something settle in his chest that he didn't have a name for. Home. Maybe that was the word. The next few months passed in a blur of work and waiting. Rowan spent his days managing the timber operations and his spare time working the Morrison claim with a small crew Caldwell had assigned. They'd found a decent vein of silver, nothing spectacular, but enough to turn a profit. Rowan's 10% stake was starting to look like it might actually be worth something. Eliza's pregnancy progressed. She got bigger, slower, more tired. The women in camp took turns helping her with Cale, bringing meals, doing washing. She protested at first, not used to accepting help, but eventually she gave in and let them. "They're building something," she told Rowan one night, "not just helping me, building a community, making this place into somewhere people want to stay." "That a good thing?" "Yeah, I think it is." Cale was walking now, stumbling around the cabin and grabbing onto furniture to keep from falling. He'd started saying words, "ma" for Eliza, "da" for Rowan, "no" for everything else. He was loud, demanding, exhausting, and Rowan couldn't imagine life without him. They heard nothing from Luther. Rowan expected him to appeal the judge's ruling, to find some new angle to attack from, but weeks passed with no word. It was both relieving and unsettling. "He's planning something," Rowan said one evening, cleaning his rifle by lamplight while Eliza mended baby clothes. "Maybe. Or maybe he finally gave up. Men like Luther don't give up. Then maybe he died, choked on his own bitterness." She knotted a thread, bit it off. "Either way, I'm not going to spend my life waiting for him to show up. We won, Rowan. We got Cale. We got the claim. We got a life here. That's more than most people get." She was right, but Rowan couldn't shake the feeling that they were living on borrowed time. He kept the rifle loaded, kept watching the tree line, kept expecting to see Luther's face in the crowd at the timber site. But Luther never came. The baby arrived in late August, 3 weeks early, and angry about it. Eliza had been hanging washing when the pain started, and by the time Rowan got her inside, she was already in hard labor. He sent Danny running for the midwife, an older woman named Agnes who'd delivered half the babies in camp, and tried to remember everything Sarah's midwife had said during Cale's birth. It didn't help. Birth was chaos, no matter how much you prepared for it. Agnes arrived, took one look at Eliza, and started barking orders. Rowan obeyed, fetching water and cloths and trying to keep Cale entertained in the other room while Eliza screamed. The labor lasted 6 hours, which Agnes said was fast for a second baby, but to Rowan, it felt like days. When the crying finally started, the baby's crying, high and fierce, Rowan felt his knees go weak with relief. Agnes emerged a few minutes later holding a tiny bundle. "You got a daughter," she said, handing the baby to Rowan. "Small but healthy. Your wife's asking for you." Rowan looked down at the baby in his arms. She was red-faced and furious, fists waving, dark hair plastered to her head. She looked nothing like Cale, nothing like anyone he knew, and yet looking at her he felt the same fierce protective instinct he'd felt the first time he held Cale. "Hey there," he said softly. "I'm your Da." The baby opened her eyes, dark blue, unfocused, and seemed to look right at him. Then she wailed again, and he laughed. Eliza was propped up in bed, pale and exhausted, but alive. She reached for the baby, and Rowan handed her over carefully. "She's got Jacob's nose," Eliza said, touching the baby's face with one finger. "And his temper, sounds like." "What are we calling her?" Eliza had thought about this, Rowan knew. She'd spent weeks trying to decide whether to name the baby after Jacob's mother, or her own, or someone else entirely. "Sarah," she said finally, looking up at him. "If that's all right with you." Rowan felt something crack open in his chest. "You sure?" "Yeah, she gave you Cale. Seems right that we give her something back." She'd have liked that. They sat together, the three of them, 4, if you counted Cale banging on the door demanding to be let in, and Rowan thought about how strange life was. A year ago, he'd had nothing but grief and a dying baby. Now he had a wife, 2 children, and something that felt dangerously close to happiness. Sarah was a difficult baby. She cried more than Cale ever had, didn't sleep longer than 2 hours at a stretch, and refused to be put down. Eliza was exhausted, running on no sleep and stubbornness, and Rowan did what he could to help, but he still had to work. Caldwell, to his credit, was understanding. He let Rowan adjust his hours, work closer to camp so he could get home to help with the babies. The other men grumbled about favoritism, but Danny, who'd been promoted to Rowan's second, shut them down. "Man's got 2 babies at home and a wife who just gave birth," Danny said one day when someone complained. "You got a problem with him taking care of his family. You can take it up with me." No one took him up on it. By October, Sarah had settled slightly. She still cried a lot, still demanded constant attention, but there were moments of peace, moments when she'd sleep in Eliza's arms, or when Cale would sit beside her cradle and babble at her like he was telling her stories. "He's going to be a good big brother," Eliza said one evening, watching Cale try to share his bread with Sarah, who was too young to eat it. "Yeah, he is." "We did good, Rowan." "We did." They were still broke, still living in a cramped cabin in a rough mining camp, still dealing with leaky roofs and winter coming and 100 small problems that made life difficult. But they had each other, had the kids, had a purpose. That was worth more than silver. The first snow came in November, light but persistent. Rowan was at the Morrison claim when he saw the riders coming up the trail. 3 of them, moving slow, careful. His hand went to his rifle before he recognized the lead horse. Luther. Rowan's crew saw them too, started muttering. Danny moved closer, hand on the knife at his belt. "Want me to send them away, boss?" Danny asked quietly. "No, I'll handle it." Rowan walked down to meet them. Luther looked worse than the last time. Thinner, older, with the kind of worn-down look that came from too many losses. The 2 men with him weren't the same muscle from before. These were harder men, the kind who'd killed before, and would again if the price was right. "Luther," Rowan said, keeping his voice neutral. "Didn't expect to see you again." "Didn't expect to be here." Luther dismounted slowly, like it hurt. But circumstances change. What do you want? To talk, that's all. Luther looked past Rowan at the claim, at the men working. Heard you struck silver, heard it's paying off. Some. Good, that's good. Luther was quiet for a moment. I'm leaving the territory, heading south, maybe California. Fresh start, you know. Rowan didn't believe him. What's the real reason you're here? Luther smiled, but there was no humor in it. You remember what I said last time about how someday you'd need something and I'd be there? Yeah. Well, turns out I'm the one who needs something, and you're the only one who can give it to me. I'm listening. I'm broke, Vance, completely cleaned out. Those investors I lined up, they sued me when the mining deal fell through. Took everything I had. I can't even afford passage south, let alone anything to start over with. He paused. I need money, not much. Just enough to get out of here and never come back. And if I don't give it to you? Then I make trouble. I file more lawsuits, I spread rumors about you and Eliza. I make your life hell until you do give it to me. Luther's eyes were cold. Or you give me what I'm asking, $500, and you never see me again. Your choice. $500. It was more than Rowan had saved, more than he could easily get, but it might be worth it to make Luther disappear forever. I don't have that kind of money just lying around, Rowan said. But you can get it. Your stake in this claim, your savings, maybe borrow from Caldwell. You can get it. Luther leaned closer. And you will. Because the alternative is me staying here, being a thorn in your side for the rest of your life. And we both know you don't want that. Rowan looked at this man who'd caused so much pain, so much trouble, and felt nothing but tired disgust. Luther was a parasite, had always been a parasite, and would die a parasite. But he was also right. $500 to be rid of him forever was cheap. Give me a week, Rowan said. 3 days? A week. I need time to gather it. Luther considered, then nodded. 1 week. I'll be at the Silver Bell in Silver Point. You bring the money there, I disappear. We're done. How do I know you won't just come back asking for more? You don't, but I give you my word. Your word's worth about as much as spit. Luther shrugged. It's all I got. Take it or leave it. Rowan took it. Luther and his men rode off, and Rowan stood there watching them go, already planning how to come up with $500 in a week. He started with Caldwell, explained the situation. The mining boss listened, expression unreadable. You're asking me to give you $500 to pay off a man who's been making your life miserable, Caldwell said finally. I'm asking to borrow it. I'll pay you back out of my stake in the claim. That could take years. I know, but it'll be worth it to be done with him. Caldwell was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll do it. But not as a loan, as a buyout. I'll give you $500 now, and in exchange, I get your 10% stake. You'll still work the claim, still get paid for your labor, but you won't be a partner anymore. It hurt to hear, but Rowan understood. Caldwell was a businessman. This was business. Deal, Rowan said. They shook on it. Caldwell had the money ready by the next day, mostly in gold coin, some in banknotes. Rowan took it home, hid it under a floorboard, and told Eliza what he'd done. She was feeding Sarah when he explained, and she listened without interrupting. You gave up your stake, she said when he finished. Yeah. The stake that was going to set us up, give us security. Yeah. For a maybe promise from a man who's lied to us from the beginning. Yeah. Eliza was quiet. Sarah finished nursing and started fussing. Eliza lifted her to her shoulder, patted her back. You think he'll keep his word? She asked finally. No, but I think $500 is enough that he won't need to come back here. He'll find some other place to bleed, some other people to use. Rowan sat down across from her. And even if he does come back, at least we tried to end it peaceful. At least we can say we did everything we could. We already did everything we could. We fought him in court and won. I know. But this way there's no loose ends. No wondering when he'll show up again. Eliza looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, give him the money, but I'm coming with you. Eliza, I'm coming. He's my uncle, my problem. I should be there to see him go. Rowan wanted to argue, but he knew that look. She'd made up her mind. They left the babies with Josephine and rode to Silver Point 3 days later. The Silver Bell was crowded for a weeknight, miners and traders and women who worked the rooms upstairs. Luther was at a back table, alone, nursing a whiskey. He stood when they approached. "Mrs. Vance, didn't expect you." "Didn't ask what you expected," Eliza said. "You got the money?" Rowan pulled the pouch from his coat, set it on the table. Luther opened it, counted quickly, nodded. "It's all here." He pocketed the pouch. "Pleasure doing business with you." "Where are you going?" Eliza asked. "Really? Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does. I want to know where you'll be so I can make sure you stay there." Luther smiled. "California. Sacramento, probably. A lot of opportunity there for a man willing to work." "You've never worked an honest day in your life." "Then I guess I'll starve." He finished his whiskey. "Or maybe I'll surprise you. Maybe this is my chance to start over, be someone different." "People don't change, Luther." "Sure they do. You did. You were a grieving widow with nothing, and now look at you. Family, home, purpose. If you can change, maybe I can too." Eliza stared at him, and Rowan saw something flicker across her face. Not forgiveness, not even understanding, just acknowledgement that people were complicated, that maybe even Luther was more than just the sum of his worst choices. "Maybe," she said finally, "but I doubt it." Luther laughed. "Yeah, me too." He stood, adjusted his coat. "This is goodbye, Eliza. For real this time. I won't be back." "Good." He nodded to Rowan, then walked out of the saloon. They watched him go, saw him mount his horse and ride south, the pouch of money secure in his coat. "Think we'll ever see him again?" Rowan asked. "I hope not." They stayed in Silver Point that night, got a room at the boarding house, slept in a real bed for the first time in months. In the morning, they rode home, and when they got back, Josephine told them both babies had been perfect angels, which they knew was a lie, but appreciated anyway. Winter came hard that year. Snow piled up past the windows, and the temperature dropped so low that water froze inside the cabin if they let the fire go out. Rowan worked when he could, but there were weeks when it was too dangerous to go out, when all they could do was huddle inside and try to stay warm. Sarah got sick in January. A cough that wouldn't quit, fever that came and went. Eliza treated her the same way she'd treated Cale, with steam and patience and stubborn refusal to let the baby give up. It took 2 weeks, but Sarah pulled through. "She's tougher than she looks," Eliza said one night, watching Sarah sleep peacefully for the first time in days. "Gets it from her mother." "Which one?" Rowan thought about that. Sarah had Jacob's blood, but she'd never known Jacob. She'd only ever known Eliza, known this family they'd built. "Both," he said. "She gets it from both." By February, the worst of the winter had passed. The snow started melting, the days got longer, and people began talking about spring. Rowan went back to full-time work, and Eliza started taking the babies outside when the weather allowed, letting Cale stumble around in the mud while Sarah watched from her sling. One afternoon in March, Rowan came home to find Eliza sitting at the table with paper and pencil, writing something. "What's that?" he asked. "Letter to my sister, Ruth, the one who married the railroad man." Eliza didn't look up. "I found her address through the territorial post office. Thought I'd write, let her know I'm alive, tell her about the family." "You think she'll write back?" "I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I want her to know anyway." She finished the letter that night, and Rowan posted it the next time he went to town. They didn't expect a response, but 6 weeks later one came, a thick envelope with Ruth's name on the return address. Eliza read it aloud to Rowan that evening, her voice catching on certain phrases. Ruth was living in Kansas City, had 3 children, was happy to hear from her sister. She'd thought Eliza was dead, had mourned her, and now couldn't believe she was alive and well, and married with 2 children. The letter ended with an invitation. If Eliza ever wanted to visit, if she ever needed anything, Ruth's door was always open. "You want to go?" Rowan asked when Eliza finished reading. "Someday, maybe. Not now, but it's nice to know the option's there." She folded the letter carefully. "Nice to know I've got family besides you and the kids." "You always did. You just didn't know where they were." Spring turned to summer. The Morrison claim produced steady silver, enough that Caldwell started talking about expanding operations. Rowan got a raise, not much, but enough to make a difference. They bought new clothes for the kids, better food. Saved a little for the first time since the cabin burned. Life wasn't easy. Cale was into everything, breaking things, making messes. Sarah screamed whenever she didn't get her way, which was often. The cabin was too small, the winters too harsh, the work too hard. But it was theirs, all of it. The struggles and the victories, the exhaustion and the joy. They'd built it together, earned it through stubbornness and sacrifice, and refusing to quit when quitting would have been easier. One evening in July, Rowan was sitting outside watching the sunset when Eliza came out and sat beside him. The babies were asleep inside, finally, and the camp was quiet. "You happy?" she asked. He thought about it. Happy wasn't the right word. Happy was too simple for what he felt. But satisfied, maybe. Content. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." "You?" "Getting there." She leaned against him and he put his arm around her shoulders. "Sometimes I still see Thomas, still hear him crying, but it's getting easier." "Sarah helps?" "Sarah helps. You help. All of this helps." She gestured at the camp, the mountains beyond, the life they'd carved out of nothing. "I never thought I'd have this again. Family, purpose, something worth protecting." "You always had that. You just didn't know it yet." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dropped below the mountains and the first stars appeared. Somewhere in the camp someone was playing a fiddle, and the sound carried on the evening air, lonesome but beautiful. The next day, Rowan was at the timber site when Danny came running up, out of breath and pale. "Boss, there's been an accident. At the main mine. Cave-in. They're saying at least a dozen men trapped." Rowan dropped his tools and ran. The mine was a quarter-mile away, and by the time he got there a crowd had gathered. Caldwell was shouting orders, organizing rescue teams. The entrance to the shaft was partially collapsed, timber supports shattered. "We need experienced men," Caldwell said when he saw Rowan. "Men who know how to shore up tunnels without bringing more down. You've worked mines before?" "Some. Back east, before I came west." "Good. You're with the first team. We go in 5 minutes." They went in with ropes and lamps and timber, crawling through spaces barely wide enough for a man. The air was thick with dust, and every few minutes there'd be a groaning sound from the walls that made Rowan's heart stop. They found the trapped miners about 50 feet in, huddled in a pocket where the collapse had stopped just short of crushing them. All alive, some injured, all terrified. It took 3 hours to get them out. 3 hours of careful digging, reinforcing, praying the whole thing didn't come down on top of them. When the last man was pulled free and Rowan finally climbed out of that hole, his hands were bleeding and his lungs felt full of dust. Eliza was there, babies with Josephine, holding a cup of water for him. "You're an idiot," she said, handing him the cup. "Going down there when you've got a family to think about. Couldn't let them die." "No, you couldn't." She touched his face, wiped dust away. "That's who you are. That's who you've always been." That night, after he'd washed and eaten and checked on the babies 3 times to make sure they were real, Rowan lay in bed thinking about what Eliza had said. About who he was, who he'd always been. He'd spent so long thinking of himself as a failure. Failed to save Sarah. Nearly failed to save Cale. Failed to protect his land from Luther. But maybe that wasn't the whole story. Maybe he'd also succeeded. Saved Cale. Built a family with Eliza. Rescued those miners. Maybe being who you were meant failing sometimes and succeeding others, and the important thing was keeping going. Fall came, and with it news from Silver Point. Luther Gaines was dead, killed in a bar fight in Sacramento, stabbed over a gambling debt. The territorial marshal sent word because there were still outstanding legal matters, but with Luther dead, those all went away. Rowan told Eliza that evening. She was mending socks while Cale played with wooden blocks Rowan had carved, and Sarah dozed in her cradle. "How do you feel?" Rowan asked after he'd explained. "I don't know. Should I feel something? He was family, but he was also—" She trailed off. "I'm not sad. That probably makes me a bad person. It makes you human." "Maybe. Mostly I just feel relieved, like we can finally stop looking over our shoulders." That night they burned the restraining order, the court documents, all the papers that had tied them to Luther. They fed them to the fire one by one and watched them turn to ash, and it felt like closing a door on a part of their lives that was finally, truly over. Winter came again, their second in Copper Ridge. This time they were ready. Plenty of firewood, supplies laid in, warm clothes for the babies. The cabin still leaked and the wind still cut through the gaps. But it was home. Kyle turned 2 in December, though they weren't exactly sure of the date, so they picked one and called it official. He was talking now, full sentences, constantly asking questions about everything. Sarah was walking, chasing after her brother, trying to do everything he did. They were a family, messy, complicated, built from broken pieces, but real. One night in January, Rowan woke to find Eliza standing at the window, looking out at the snow. "Can't sleep?" he asked quietly, just thinking. "About what?" She was quiet for a moment. "About how a year and a half ago I was ready to die. Didn't see a point in keeping going, and now," she gestured at the sleeping babies, at the cabin around them, "now I can't imagine not being here." Rowan got up, stood beside her. "You saved us, me and Cale. We'd have died without you. We saved each other. That's how it works." They stood together, watching the snow fall, and Rowan thought about everything they'd been through. The desperation, the fear, the battles fought and won. The children they were raising, the life they were building. It wasn't the life he'd planned. Wasn't the life Eliza had planned either, but it was theirs, earned through blood and tears and refusing to give up. "I love you," he said, surprising himself. They'd never said it, not once in all this time. It had seemed unnecessary, too complicated given how they'd started. Eliza turned to look at him. "I love you too. Took me a while to figure it out, but I do." They kissed, gentle and certain, and it felt like making a promise neither of them had known they needed to make. Spring came eventually, the way it always did. The snow melted, the rivers ran high, and the world turned green again. Caldwell announced plans to expand the mining operation even further, which meant more work, more money, more stability. Rowan and Eliza talked about building a bigger cabin, maybe on the land where the old one had burned. It would cost money they didn't have yet, but they were saving, slowly. Someday, it would happen. Cale started helping with small chores, gathering kindling, feeding the chickens they'd bought from a farmer down the valley. Sarah followed him everywhere, mimicking everything he did, and they fought constantly but loved each other fiercely. One afternoon in May, Rowan came home to find Eliza in the garden she'd planted behind the cabin, pulling weeds while the babies played nearby. She looked up when she heard him, smiled, and he was struck by how different she looked from that hollow-eyed woman he'd met in the trading post. She looked alive, happy, home. "Good day?" she asked. "Good enough. You?" Sarah ate dirt 3 times and Cale tried to climb a tree and got stuck. So, about average. Rowan laughed, scooped Sarah up before she could eat more dirt. "You're a menace," he told her. She just grinned at him, dirt on her face and mischief in her eyes. That evening they ate dinner as a family, venison stew that Eliza had made, bread from the baker in camp, milk from their own goat. It was simple food, nothing fancy, but it tasted like everything good in the world. After the babies were asleep, Rowan and Eliza sat outside like they'd done that night a year ago, watching the stars come out. "You think we'll ever tell them the whole story?" Eliza asked. "About how we met, about Luther, all of it?" "Someday, maybe, when they're old enough to understand." "What'll we say?" Rowan thought about it. "The truth. That we started as strangers making a desperate deal, and we became family because we chose each other every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. That's a good story. It's our story." They sat in comfortable silence, and Rowan thought about the future. About Cale growing up strong, about Sarah finding her way, about more children maybe, if they were blessed, about building that bigger cabin, about watching his kids grow old enough to have kids of their own. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth having ever was, but they'd faced worse and survived. They'd keep surviving, keep building, keep choosing each other. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of pine and river water. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and Rowan felt Eliza tense slightly beside him. "It's all right," he said quietly. "We're safe here." "I know." She leaned against him. "I know we are." And they were. They'd fought for this safety, this peace, this family. They'd earned it through sacrifice and stubbornness and love that grew slowly but rooted deep. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent. The mining camp settled into sleep around them. Inside the cabin, two children dreamed whatever children dream, safe and warm and loved. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that was enough. That was more than enough. It was everything.